Good evening, everyone. We are the Group 7. In this chapter, we will be discussing the professional standards in auditing theory. Before we start, let me introduce myself first. I'm Bernadette Alindayu, the first reporter for today. As you can see, our topic is divided into 4 parts. Part 1 is the introduction to the professional standard, followed by the Generally Accepted Auditing Standards or GAAS, Part 3, which is the Philippine Standards on Auditing, and the last part will be the Quality Control System. When it comes to auditing financial statements, an auditor's opinion must be based on an examination conducted in accordance with professional standards. These standards measure the quality of performance of individuals or organization. Ang objective ng audit ng financial statements ay ang makapagbigay ang auditor ng kanyang opinion as to the fairness of the presentation of financial statement. Pero paano natin malalaman na kapag sinabi ng auditor na fairly presented ang financial statement, ay fairly presented nga talaga ito? Let me ask you a question. What if kung ikaw ang client na magre-rely sa opinion ng isang auditor? What will give you the confidence to trust the auditor's opinion? Paano ka makasisiguro na reliable ito? Dito na ngayon papasok ang Generally Accepted Auditing Standards or GAAS. So the Board of Accountancy promulgated 10 Generally Accepted Auditing Standards that establish required level of quality for performing financial statement audits. These standards must be followed by CPAs when auditing financial statements. So before, meron lang tayong 10 generally accepted auditing standards. But in the development of these standards, Philippine Standards on Auditing are issued to clarify the meaning of these 10 GAAS. So GAAS ang minimum requirements to measure the quality of the performance of the audit. Dahil marami ang nagre-rely sa opinion ng isang auditor, kailangan ma-meet ng isang auditor ang minimum standard or requirements para makapagbigay siya ng reasonable assurance sa pagpe-perform ng audit. Take note, ang naibibigay lang na assurance ng isang auditor ay reasonable assurance, hindi absolute assurance. Ang GAAS rin ang nagiging basis natin kung nagkakaroon ba ng pagkukulang sa trabaho si auditor or na-meet niya ba yung mga minimum standards sa pagpe-perform ng audit. So the GAAS contains 10 standards which are divided into 3 major groups, namely the general standards which states the characteristic of an auditor, the standard of fieldwork which states the minimum requirements in the performance of audit procedures, and the standards of reporting which contains the contents of the report. Let's start with the general standards. So ito ang mga characteristics na dapat meron ng isang auditor. So the first standard requires the auditor to have a technical training and proficiency. Kung magre-rely ang users ng financial statements sa opinion ng isang auditor, dapat ang isang auditor ay may formal education, may practical training and experience, may continuing professional education, and of course, dapat certified public accountant. Dahil dapat nga, expert ang isang auditor sa area na ito. Otherwise, walang credibility ang kanyang opinion. Independence, which is the second standard. It requires the auditor to maintain an independence in mental attitude. Dahil nagbibigay ang auditor ng assurance sa users ng financial statement, dapat ang isang auditor ay walang kinikilingan at pinapanigang sides. Dapat rin na ang opinion na ibinibigay niya ay expressed based on evidence. So the third standard requires the auditor to exercise professional care in performing an audit and preparing the report. Ang ibig sabihin lang nito, dahil ikaw ay isang professional, kinakailangan ang pag-iingat sa lahat ng aspeto ng pag-audit at pag-perform and audit procedures thoroughly. Sa paggawa ng mga audit procedures and pag-evaluate sa kung anong opinion ang ibinibigay niya, dapat mayroong questioning mind ang isang auditor or ang tinatawag nating professional skepticism. So let's proceed to the next grouping or the standards of fieldwork. So the first standard requires adequate planning. Kailangan efficient or minimal lang yung nasasayang na resources ni auditor. And effective, meaning namimit ng isang auditor ang objective sa pag-perform ng audit. Ano ang objective na yon? That is to express an opinion as to the fairness of the financial statements. So by planning, dito mo malalaman kung ano ba ang itetest mo sa audit, kung anong areas or processes or accounts sa financial statements ang may higher risk of being materially misstated. Malalaman mo rin kung ano mga potential problems ang haharapin mo along the way at kung ano-ano ang kailangang gamiting resources para sa pag-audit. The standard also requires adequate supervision. Bakit? Of course, it's not enough na may plano ka lang. You also have to make sure na lahat ng team members ay nagpe-perform according to plan. So, the second standard of fieldwork, which is the internal control consideration, requires proper study and evaluation of existing internal control. So, dapat inaalam ng isang auditor ang nature of business ng isang company for him to understand the events, transactions, and practices that may have significant effect on the financial statements. Dapat rin na naiintindihan ng isang auditor ang environment ng isang business dahil maaaring maapektuhan nito ang business ng kumpanya na ina-audit niya. Baka kasi may certain laws or regulations na may requirement in terms of financial reporting. Another importance of understanding the environment of a certain company is its significant impact as to the fairness of the financial statement. The auditor should also have an understanding of the audit client's internal control in order to plan the audit and develop an efficient and effective audit approach. So the standard of fieldwork or the last standard of fieldwork requires the auditor to obtain sufficient competent evidential matter in order to have a reasonable basis in forming an opinion. So, dapat may basis ang maibibigay na opinion ng isang auditor. Ang mga basis na ito ay yung mga evidence na makukuha ni auditor by performing audit procedures. So, meron tayong 4 na audit procedures. Ang inspections, observations, inquiries, and of course, confirmation. So let's proceed to the last grouping, which is the standard of reporting. So the first standard of reporting requires that the report shall state whether the financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So this is an example of independent auditor's report. So makikita natin sa report na to kung na-present ba yung financial statement in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Yan. So, example to ng auditor's report. So, going back to the second standard of reporting, which is the inconsistency. So, inconsistency, dapat ilagay ng auditor sa kanyang report ang mga accounting principles na hindi na-observe ng client consistently. Remember, ang mga significant changes sa nagamit na accounting principles ay may impact sa gagamit ng financial statements. So, the third standard of reporting, which is the disclosure. So, ang pinapoint out lang dito ay yung disclosure or ang notes to financial statements. So, ina-assume natin na adequate ang report. If hindi adequate, dapat ilagay ni auditor ang inadequacy sa report kung meron man. So, the last one, or the fourth standard of reporting, which is the opinion. So, simplihan na lang natin. This requires the auditor to clearly state his opinion and the basis of his opinion.
So, hello, I am Ronel Almension, and for the continuation of the report, I will be discussing now the Philippine standards on auditing. So, previously stated, diniscuss ni Ms. Bernadette na yung GAAS daw, or the Generally Accepted Auditing Standards, are the minimum standards that every auditor should follow in performing their work. So, tama naman, no? In connection with that, si AASC muna yung pag-uusapan natin. Mamaya i-connect natin si GAAS. Kasi dalawa yan, GAAS and the PSA. So, first, let's talk about the AASC. So, yung Auditing Standards and Practice Council, ito yung former na nagpo-promulgate ng auditing standards, pero pinalitan na sila ni AASC noong 2005. So, recently up to now, si Auditing and Assurance Standard Council na yung nagpo-promulgate ng auditing standards and frameworks. So, in connection with the GAAS, sabi nila AASC, we need to further have a clean and comprehensive standard given these previously 10 minimum standards. So, to further have a clean understanding of this, to clarify the meaning of these 10 GAAS, they issued what we call the pronouncements. And also take note that these pronouncements not just came from the council themselves, because they adopted the international standards from different concerned services. So they are the ISA, ISAA, ISRE, and ISRS. So, sa international standards for auditing, so medyo malaki sakop nito, siya talaga yung sa actual auditing. International standards on assurance service engagement naman, so ito sila yung para sa framework of pagdating sa engagement, which will be later discussed in the later chapter. Si international standards on review engagement naman sa review, and si international standards on related services sa other concerned services, of course in relation to the auditing work. And sabi dito, in addition to the pronouncement, meron silang ina-attach na practice statements. So yung pinaka-purpose lang nito is for practical assistant of this ng apat na ito na inadapt nila. So kasi nga 'di ba, mahirap yung galing international, so then i-adapt nyo sa local. So meron needed talaga itong practice statement. Makikita natin yan mamaya sa structure ng kanilang pronouncement. So therefore, it is by the creation of this 4 pronouncement that the Philippine Standards of Auditing was born. So ayan, meron na tayong sariling auditing standard with the adaptation of course from international setting. So ulitin ko lang kanina, si Philippine Standards on Auditing, they are issued to clarify and to further discuss and comprehensively the meaning of the 10 GAAS, na diniscuss previously. So AASC undertakes a review of the standards and practice statements issued by the AASB to determine if this can be adapted. So hindi agad nila ina-adapt, in the Philippines, with or without changes after considering any local requirements imposed by law or practice. So of course, they need to consider if that certain international standard na i-adapt nila or i-adapt natin, if does not violate our local customs or basic rules, or of course our law. So for example, halimbawa lang, what if sa standard na yon merong statement no allowing the disclosure of their bank deposits and balances details during audit, no? Sinasabi nila clients can disclose or are required to show their bank statements or their bank details to the engagement team. For example, ganyan. So, diba, that will contradict as far as I remember what we called the RA 1405 or what we call the bank secrecy law. So, wherein, dito sa law, as far as I remember, pinoprohibit nila na i-disclose ng ninuman ang bank details ng sinuman. So, pero may exception na napag-aralan namin sa tax na in case of tax deficiency ni taxpayer and nag-apply siya ng compromise penalty to lessen yung liability niya, no, or yung penalty niya. So the revenue officer can inquire. Hindi sila mismo yung titingin, pero they have the power to inquire doon sa bank balances ni taxpayer na nag-apply for compromise penalty. Kasi for example, the reason niya wala na siyang pera. So he or she really need to disclose nung anumang sources of money niya to prove, no, and to of course to minimize and to approve her being a recipient of compromise penalty na tinatawag. So that is the case na pwedeng tingnan yung bank detail mo, no. So anyway, so marami pang cases talaga na, so kaya nga nire-review pa yan ni Board of Accountancy, no, bago talagang gawing promulgated pronouncement or what we call the standards dito sa ating locality. Kaya as of the moment, may mga pending approval pa rin na sinasubmit na pronouncement si AASC, waiting sila sa approval ni Board of Accountancy. No. Si AASC kasi and si PFRS, under siya ng umbrella ni BOA dito sa atin. So ayun, ito na po yung structure ng ASC pronouncement. So makikita natin dito, itong dalawa, ito yung main stem ng pronouncement nila or ng framework. Una, yung framework for assurance engagement, and of course, hindi nila pababayaan or hindi nila left out yung related services. Importante yun. So unahin natin to dito. So, under the framework for assurance engagement, meron tayong audit, review, and other assurance engagement. So, napaka-importante ng structure na to kasi to understand further and clearer and para malaman din natin yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng pronouncement ng AASC when it comes to auditing framework. So, under audit, meron tayong Philippine Standards on Auditing. So, makikita mo yan sa PSA 100 to 999. So, kung may nabasa tayong PSA 105, PSA 800, so, malalaman agad natin, yan, that is Philippine Standards on Auditing. And may kinalaman lang yan sa audit mismo. And of course, sinabi ko nga kanina, meron tayong tinatawag na practice statement. So, sa bawat sa bawat element sa audit, review, and other assurance engagement for practical assistance ng CPAs in performing audit. So, yung Philippine Accounting Practice Statements makikita natin sa PAPS 1000 to 1999. So, pag may nakita tayong statement PAPS 1005 or PAPS 1800 that is concerned more on practical assistance lang yan related doon sa Philippine Standards on Auditing. So pangalawa, sa review, meron tayong Philippine Standards on Review Engagement that will be referenced to PSRE 2000 to 2699. So makikita nyo sinundan niya, ayan, ito yung sinundan niya, si PAPS 1000 to 1999. So pagdating sa 2000, mag-i-start na si Philippine Standards on Review. Ayan, andyan na yung pronouncement niya. Then after 2699, practice statements naman ni review, of course. Hindi maaalis yung practice statement every main concern ni pronouncement, no? And yung statement sa Philippine Review Engagement ay makikita sa Preps 2700 to 2999. So, and from 2999, makikita natin si 3,000. And that is concerned with the third element sa under Framework for Assurance Engagement, which is the Philippine Standards on Assurance Engagement or the PSAA. Yung reference niya is PSAA 3,000 to 3,699. So, guys, yung audit, review, and other engagement pala, hindi namin comprehensively di-discuss dito kasi dito lang sa chapter na to, binabackbone lang natin yung standards or professional standards na behind these services. So, yung meaning and actual, kung ano yung ginagawa mismo sa audit, review, and other assurance engagements, I think i-report yan ng the following chapters. So, looking back, going back to meron tayong ulit Philippine Assurance Engagement Practice Standards to, what do you call this? Nakalimutan ko. To assist, for practical assistance ni Philippine Standards on Assurance Engagement. So, sila naman yung magko-cover ng PAEPS, PAEPS talaga yun. Philippine Assurance Engagement Practice Standards 3,700 to 3,999. So, punta tayo sa related services. Under related services, merong dalawang magkaibang component, pero kung mapapansin natin dito, isa lang yung standards, yung reference niya, no? So, ibig sabihin, magkaiba talaga sila in nature or in form, pero yung ano nila, yung governing standard, isa lang. So, for example, dito kasi sa agreed upon procedures engagement or whether you are in compilation engagement, isa lang yung basis mo, no? To comply with the ASC pronouncement. And that is first, the Philippine Standards on Related Services, the PSRS 4,000 to 4,699. So, kung makikita nyo, sinundan niya naman si 3,999. Magkakasunod lang yan. And lastly, we have the Philippine Related Services, yung practice statement naman dito. So, kung makikita nyo, itong nasa baba, lahat yan practice statements. Ayan. Lahat ito practice statements. Ito naman yung pinaka-standard talaga, no? And pagdating naman dito sa agreed upon procedures engagement, I think magkaisa lang sila ng STEM kasi si compilation parang during the compilation parang yung i-consider lang naman niya doon is what's in the agreed upon engagements. So, next. So, I hope na malinaw yung structure nito, no? Yung ASC pronouncement. And kung may question pa kayo, classmates, erase na lang natin kay sir sa synchronous. And tingin ko lang kasi, mahalaga tong mga ganito para alam natin saan tayo magre-reference, especially pag may explanation tayo. So, madali natin malalaman yung range ng number doon sa pronouncement. So now we will be talking about the system of quality control. So tapos na tayo sa pronouncement, no? So quality control are policies and procedures adopted by CPAs to provide reasonable assurances of confronting with professional standards in performing audit and related services. So by the definition itself, ito yung policies and procedures na ina-adapt ni CPA when performing audit, no, and other related services. So anong kinalaman ni reasonable assurance dito? Yung system of quality control is manggagaling sa firm. Kasi napag-aralan natin sa chapter 1 na pag yung firm daw may system of quality control, it helps a lot doon sa credibility or reliability ng information system nila. Kaya they will really help CPAs, no, to provide reasonable assurances. And napaka-importante ni system of quality control for the CPA, no? Kasi unang-una, CPA public relies on the professional CPAs. So, pag may quality control yung firm, magbe-base dun sa CPA, and that will strengthen the reliability whatever the product report of the audit, no? And pangalawa, to ensure consistent high quality of their work, of course, connected din naman doon. And pangatlo, audits are normally conducted by audit teams. So, yung role ni system of quality control is ito yung ginagamit. Ito yung mga dito kasi sa system of quality control, may elements to dito. And yung elements na yun yung magiging basis ni CPA, no, to determine if the audit teams are performing quality work. So, ibig sabihin, walang petiks-petiks lang, walang nilalabag na ethical standards and other elements doon during the audit engagement. So, 'di ba sa firm, kunwari may audit team sila, tapos magpe-present sila ng financial statements by internal auditors. So, during the review, kailangan ni CPA malaman what's in the system of quality control that is being implemented inside the firm. So, according to the provision of the PSQC1, a firm has an obligation to establish a system of quality control designed to provide it with reasonable assurance that the firm and its personnel comply with professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements, and that the report issued by them are appropriate in the circumstance. So, kung mababasa natin, it is an obligation of the firm, no? Kasi it will not just benefit the CPAs or the independent auditors. Primarily, magbe-benefit ito sa kanila kasi nga sinabi ko kanina, it enhances their credibility and reliability of their information system. Looking back pala kanina dito, sa point of view naman ni entity, no? Kasi yung sinabi ko kanina, puro point of view ni independent CPA. Sa point of view naman ni entity, yung system of quality control, importante to kasi it will help them decide whether to accept or to deny the engagement from the independent auditors or the independent audit teams. So, merong consideration dyan sa entity, like if the team is competent, if the team is independent, and others, which will be discussed in the later chapters. Or in the later discussion pala, nasa chapter lang na to. So, with regards to the provision, engagement teams first will implement quality control procedures that are applicable to audit engagement. So, during the engagement, no, mag-uusap sila. Considering the system of quality control, mag-implement sila ng procedures applicable doon sa particular services na napag-usapan nila. Second, provide the firm with relevant information to enabling the functioning of that part of the firm's system of quality control relating to independence. So, kailangan ng audit teams or sabihin natin isa lang, ng independent CPA, kailangan nilang ipamukha talaga sa firm na wag kayong magtataka kung ganito yung approach namin because we are independent in the first place, and kailangan naming pakialaman yung system of quality control nyo because it is with this process that we will be able to review your level of compliance doon sa professional, legal, and other ethical requirements. And lastly, they are entitled to rely on the firm's systems unless information provided by the firm or other parties suggest otherwise. So, doon lang talaga sila sa system ni client magfo-focus, no? Unless may provide sila or yung other concerned parties, which will be also, of course, subject to review muna. So, looking back pala dito, ito kasing Philippine Standards on Quality Control, nasa in provision to the point of view of the firm, no? Ino-oblige sila to establish. So, point of view naman ni audit teams, which will be later sa chapter, yung sa entity or firm, yung magpo-focus sila sa point of view ni firm, ay, tama ba? ni audit pala, sorry. Kasi yung focus natin dito is about the standards. So, sa firm talaga. So, dito ba pasok yung ethical requirements, yung independence, and also other related elements that will serve as their main basis, no, to assess the entity's compliance on professional, regulatory, and legal requirements. So yung Philippine Standards on Quality Control or the PSQC was also one of the pronouncements by one of the pronouncement approved by Board of Accountants. So hanggang dun lang po yung report. Nagbigay ako ng preliminaries about about the system of quality control, and yung specific elements i-discuss at hihimay-himayin ng ating next presenter na si Miss Damsel. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Damsel Ruiz Alderite, and I will be discussing about system of quality control. We all know how crucial it is to control the quality of everything. For example na lang sa food. Of course, we do not want to be served something that is below the acceptable standard, diba? I know that auditing is not something to be compared with serving a food, but I'm talking about the quality control that must be done. Kung sa quality nga ng food ay pihikan tayo, syempre ibang usapan na when it comes to auditing, lalo na sa mga financial statements. If we are in the position of a client, of course we don't want an audit reports na alam natin hindi trinabaho ng maayos. We will know that it is a quality service or not based on the standard control policies and procedures. What we have here are the things to be considered in establishing policies and procedures. We will go with that later. As stated in the book, audit firms are required to implement quality control policies and procedures to ensure that audits are done in accordance with PSA, or Philippine Standards on Auditing. The policies and procedures they have to make is not something without a basis. Dahil magkakaiba ang audit firms in terms of firm size and nature of its practice, cost-benefit considerations, at iba pang factors, PSA 220 will serve as their guide for that policies and procedures. First, leadership responsibilities. Unahin muna natin ang engagement partner. The main responsibility of an engagement partner is look over and supervise the audit engagement in a firm. At dahil in charge siya sa overall quality ng audit, engagement partner should also be an example to them. Here are the following qualities to be evaluated by an engagement partner to execute quality performance: complying with professional standards, complying with firm's quality control procedures, issuing a proper audit reports, the engagement's team ability to raise concerns without fear of reprisals. So about sa reprisal, kasi 'di ba, there are scenarios na kapag nag-raise ka ng concern, minsan na pag-iinitan ka. For example, you want to raise concern about sa doubt mo sa ino-audit mo. Dapat walang fear ng reprisal kasi it will affect how will you perform an audit. Next, ethical requirements. Lahat ng profession merong ethical requirements, and of course, it also applies sa auditors. Ito yung mga bagay na kailangan nilang i-comply. First off ay integrity. It is a quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. Hindi na malingid sa kaalaman natin what are the risks of being an auditor. Alam natin na it can make or break a person. Hindi naman masasabi na baka magkaroon ng unethical offers ng clients na i-manipulate yung ganito or ganyan. So yung pagkakaroon ng integrity will keep us away from that. Next is objectivity. Let us differentiate first the subjectivity and objectivity. Ang subjectivity ay based sa personal judgment, feelings, or point of view. Ang objectivity naman ay based sa observations and measurements. at yung information niya ay factual. Of course, hindi tayo pwedeng mag-audit subjectively. Kaya nga, kailangan natin ng mga evidences para sa transactions ng financial statements, di ba? We need the basis sa lahat ng ino-audit natin, regardless of opinion we might have. So, next is confidentiality. We know for a fact na yung mga na-obtain nating information and financial statements is exclusively reported sa clients. We have no right to disseminate any of information to others. At may note dito, non-compliance with this must be properly resolved and documented. Of course, kailangan tong i-document para kung mag-occur man ito ulit, alam na kung paano mag-deal sa ganitong bagay. Next, independence. It simply means independence from parties whose interests might be harmed by the results of an audit. Ang engagement partner din ang in charge sa compliance ng independence requirements ng mga to. First, the engagement partner needs to obtain relevant information to identify the threats to independence. The information will be evaluated whether it will create a threat to independence, and appropriate procedures will be done to eliminate such threat or reduce the acceptable level. And finally, the conclusion on independence that needs to have a basis. Next is the acceptance and continuance of client relationship. Siyempre, we all know that there are relationships na hindi na dapat ipagpatuloy pa o kaya naman hindi na dapat sinisimulan pa. I'm talking about client relationship here and not romantic relationship. Here are the things that should be considered for that. Of course, hindi lang dapat ang auditor ang may integrity. It also applies for the clients, because they will be the one who will provide evidences or mga bagay na dapat mag-justify sa transactions nila sa financial statements na provide nila sa auditor. The audit teams will also need to evaluate themselves if they will be able to perform the engagement. Siyempre, if they are not capable to the work na gusto ng client, might as well not to accept the job. Next is the human resources and assignment. Here are the policies and procedures that should be addressed concerning personnel: capabilities and competencies, career development, assignment of engagement teams, recruitment, performance evaluation, compensation, and promotion. The engagement partner should be satisfied in engagement team's capabilities, competence, and commitment to ethical principles necessary to perform the engagement. That is the end of my report, and let us hear Ms. Laika Aquino for the continuation of the report. Thank you.
So, hi, good evening, sir. Good evening, classmates. I am Laika J. Aquino, and I'm the last reporter for Chapter 2. So, for the continuation of report of Ms. Alderite about elements of quality control policies and procedures, this is the fourth element. So, the engagement performance. The firm should establish policies and procedures designed to provide reasonable assurance that engagement are performed in accordance with professional standards and other regulatory and legal requirements, and that the audit report is issued is appropriate in the circumstances. So, like other element, it aims to ensure that engagement are always performed according to firm policies and procedures to avoid any risk and to help maintain the reputation of the firm and the profession. So, the engagement partner should take responsibility for the first, the direction; second, the supervision; third is the review; fourth, consultation; Fifth, engagement quality control review and differences of opinion. So as we go along, we will going to tackle each of this. So first is the direction. They should be informed of their responsibilities, the nature of the entity's business, potential problems that may arise, and the detailed approach to the performance of the engagement. Well, to minimize misunderstandings and to practice their aligned activities, it is critical that they understand their respective responsibilities. Because you know relatively few specifics about your task, it will be easier to tackle an unforeseen difficulty if one arises. So second is the supervision. The partner should monitor the progress of the audit, resolve accounting and audit issues, and consider the level of consultation provided for the engagement. So supervision, it can help their partners to maintain good standards of work and ensure that staff follow relevant policies and procedures. So a good supervision can result to a successful organization and attract competitive employees. So for the next is review. Review, work performed by the assistant should be reviewed. Consider whether the audit procedures, evidence, and documentations are appropriate to support the conclusion. So, of course, it is important because it is to recheck and to assure that the informations are correct. So, next is the consultation. So, in consultation, the firm should establish policies and procedures that encourage firm personnel to seek assistance from authoritative sources either within or outside the firm. So, it is important that they seek help since we seek help since consultation lowers the possibility of risk of making a mistakes, and also consultation improves the application of professional judgment. So, in consultation, the engagement partner should first is be responsible. So, be responsible for the engagement team undertaking appropriate consultation on difficult and contentious matters. So, next is the engagement partner should be satisfied. Be satisfied that members of engagement team have undertaken appropriate consultation during the course of the engagement, both within the engagement theme and others at the appropriate level within or outside the firm. So, also be satisfied that the nature and scope of and conclusions resulting from such consultations are documented and agreed within the party consulted. So lastly, the engagement partner should determine that conclusions resulting from consultations have been implemented. So, for the next is the engagement quality control review. The firm should establish policies and procedures requiring an engagement quality control review that provides an objective evaluation of the significant judgment made and conclusions reached in formulating the auditor's report. So, the purpose of EQCR or the Engagement Quality Control Review is to have an objective evaluation of significant matters, including identified risks and significant judgment made by the engagement team. So this requires the engagement partner. First is to determine that an engagement quality control reviewer has been appointed. So next is discuss significant matters arising during the audit engagement, including those identified during the quality control review with the engagement quality control reviewer. And lastly, not to issue the auditor's report until the completion of the engagement quality control review. So, the firm should establish policies and procedures setting out the scope of quality control review, criteria for the eligibility of the reviewer, and documentation of the quality control review. So, for the last responsibility of the engagement performance is the differences of opinion. So, the engagement team should follow the firm's policies and procedures for dealing with and resolving differences of opinion that arise within the engagement team, with those consulted and, where applicable, between the engagement partner and the engagement quality control reviewer. So, the engagement partner should inform the members of the engagement team to bring matters involving differences of opinion to the attention of the engagement partner or others within the firm as appropriate without fear of reprisals. The audit report should not be issued until the matter involving differences of opinion is resolved. So, in short, in differences of opinion, members of the engagement team should be informed that they can bring concerns involving differences of opinion to the attention of the engagement partner or others within the firm without fear of retaliation. The audit report should not be released until the disagreements between the parties have been settled. So, for the next elements of quality control policies and procedures is monitoring. So, in monitoring, the continued adequacy and operational effectiveness of quality control policies and procedures is to be monitored. Policies and procedures must be adopted to provide reasonable assurance that the systems of quality control are relevant, adequate, and operating effectively. So, the main purpose of the monitoring element of a system of quality control is to provide the firm with reasonable assurance that the policies and procedures related to the system of quality control are relevant, adequate, operating effectively, and complied within the practice. So, we must remember this, the main purpose of monitoring. So, in monitoring, it involves an ongoing consideration and evaluation of the appropriateness of the design, the effectiveness of the operation of a firm's quality control system, and a firm's compliance with its quality control policies and procedures. So, the firm's quality control policies and procedures should be communicated to its personnel in a manner that provides reasonable assurance that the policies and procedures are understood and implemented. So, for the last is the quality assurance review. In quality assurance review, recognizing the importance of a professional account services to the society, the government has also taken steps to ensure that CPAs work to the highest standards which can reasonably be expected from them. So, the government, through the BOA, has required all CPA firms and individual CPAs in public practice to obtain a certificate of accreditation to practice public accountancy. So, such certificate is valid for 3 years and can be renewed after complying with the requirements of the BOA. So, as a condition to the renewal of the certificate of accreditation to practice public accountancy, the board requires individual CPAs and CPA firms to undergo a quality assurance review to ensure that this CPA is that these CPAs comply with accounting and auditing standard and practices. So the PRC is supposed to create a QRC, which is the Quality Review Committee, which shall conduct a quality review on the audits conducted by CPAs in public practice. So based on the results of the quality review, the QRC may recommend the revocation of the certificate of registrations of CPAs who have not observed the quality control measures or those who have not complied with the standards of quality prescribed for the practice of public accountancy. So as of today, QRC or the Quality Review Committee has not yet been created. Nevertheless, regulatory agencies like SEC or the Security and Exchange Commission have initiated programs to ensure that CPA firms are implementing appropriate quality control policies and procedures that would enable these firms to comply with the professional standards when providing professional services. So, this ends our topic for today, the chapter 2, the professional standards. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you've learned a lot. That's all. Thank you.